We're going to be talking about Yoi basses today. It does work in the higher area of the spectrum. They are the sound you wish you could make when you burp. That's what a Yoi bass is. They sound like they're saying Yoi, and typically they're accomplished through the use of a aliaser of some kind, and that's a pretty common way to do it. We're going to be doing it. I'm actually not sure if aliasing is involved, but friggin' high amount of resonance is the way we're going, baby. So let me show you with some drums real quick. It is kind of cool with some drums. Kind of fun. I could honestly sit here jamming out on this weird sound all day. This is the product of me trying to learn more about the bread and butter ladder filter and getting familiar with how it sounds and getting deeply sidetracked down the route of frequency modulation inside of Filterverse. So first, let's start off with the input. The input is quite a beastly thing, and it is super important to getting this right. I am using FL Studio, and let me go ahead and hide a few things here. All right, I am using FL Studio, and I'm using a special layer MIDI thing that a lot of FL users may never see before. It is a MIDI plugin. You can select your children by selecting the channels, and you hit set children, and then when I play it with the layer, it triggers two things. It triggers Harmor, which is the synthesizer I'm using as the input, and critically, it triggers a Midi Out function, which I have connected to the ADSR. Well, it's just connected once you set this up, so that it fires. Let me show you what happens if I unlock my MIDI from this and only fire it out of Harmor. We're missing the Yoi part of the sound. We've got the resonance and things, but it's kind of missing. So again, I added a layer, just selected them, and then you go with this open, you hit set children, and that sets it, and you can do a bunch of other stuff, but I really wasn't that interested. And then to make it so that I only receive notes from my MIDI controller, I went to complete control all, and this locks it so that even when I have Harmor open, it correctly sends MIDI to the ADSR envelope inside of Filterverse, triggering that envelope motion, that sort of a sound. And it is important for me to point out one other thing. This Midi Out plugin, another one a lot of FL users may never use, is sending MIDI to here. This is how I'm getting the MIDI to Filterverse for it to see. I'm sending it out port 1. And if you go to the options here, the little cog with the icon, you click this if that's not there. And I'm using MIDI input port 1. So this says receive MIDI coming in on input port 1. And this is sending MIDI out on port 1. So I hit the note and it sends that note data here. Now it does contain pitch information, but it really doesn't matter. I'm just using it for the ADSR, which is triggering that sound. So that's the MIDI setup. Honestly, I think it's like a boring thing. But when I was new, it confused me deeply, so I'm explaining it here. So with that being said, that's how everything is triggering, okay? And I'm triggering off this layer every time to guarantee that when I have Harmor open and I'm messing with Harmor, it still fires correctly. If you look, both layers are firing when I hit notes, which is pretty nice. So let's take a look at the input sound. Let's go ahead and bypass Filterverse here for a second. This is the input sound. It is a beefy, low thing. Now this sub, it really only matters for some of the higher notes. So the lower you go, the less you really need this because it leaves the audio range and just doesn't do that much for us anymore. For example, if I have it off, play some higher notes. Here it is with it on. way beefier. It also sounds lower, but it extends much further up into the range, which is really useful. If I play low notes though, that's our low note. If I get rid of this, it's pretty similar. Not a huge difference. Yeah, with it. Not a big difference. So this move, it's kind of weird, but it's important to make it so you can play higher and still get that cool yoi noise coming out of it. So that's an important stage here. It is tuned down an octave. If I have it up an octave, this is just to change the range of the keyboard. You can just play an octave lower. Go ahead and take it down. Just a nice sound. So just frequency detune just moves everything down. It is important. There is three critical moves here, I guess. The first one is the unison. I have two voices being generated, so two of these waveforms, and there's a pitch difference. There's zero panning difference. If I add panning, it's still a really cool sound, very stereo. But they don't phase with each other the same anymore. And this is something that you got to pick. And as you produce, you may choose one or the other. I opted for the no panning option, which I know, actually, after hearing it now, it is pretty dope. Maybe I'll leave the panning up. But if you bring it down, it'll force them to phase in mono, which can lead to some cool results given some settings that you may choose later on. And then the pitch difference is also a pretty critical move. So this pitch difference, if we get rid of this, it sits a lot more still. And that might be something you want, but with it, you get that glorious, glorious rubbing motion. That's just so good. So that's what we're using for this. There is also a crude high pass on. It's doing nothing right now. Before I was using it, you can rein it in. If there's too much low end, shaving it off before you send it in Filterverse, in my opinion, leads to better results. Cleaner sounds, especially if you're going for like a layered sound and you're going to do like sub on your own or whatever. So another move that I'm not exactly using here because right now it's really just the sound, but one worth having already set up. And then finally, the distortion. Doesn't matter a whole lot which distortion. Well, it kind of does. So let me change them, but I have the amount and the wet driven rather high. And if we go for like, here's classic, hill, so it doesn't matter a whole lot, but some of them do have a cool effect. Like I think I liked classic quite a bit. Log is nice. Most of these are very similar. We'll go with classic this time. What the heck? But having one is important. If you have it off, that's what you get. And we're driving the input through the roof, okay? And it's kind of designed to be that way. So anyways, that's the synth patch. It's important. We understand the synth patch and the key moves in this. And you know, you could change things here and try other things. These are the settings I found that finally settled on something cool. Let's go over to Filterverse now and take a look at sort of what makes this sick. Also, is there a way to make this bigger? Can we make this bigger? Oh, we can make it bigger. Holy crap, it's huge. Okay, we'll go with that one. Wow, this is so big now. All right, so Filterverse, what the heck's going on here? There's only one module. It's bread and butter. And it's a ladder filter. If you look at it, it's got ladder filter designed with a sweet sound. Adding resonance will slightly reduce the amplitude of the low end, leaving more headroom for the resonance peak. I wanted to sort of see what this was about. Now, I have it set up so it's close to a band pass, but it's still got some low pass. So the low end still comes in. If we move this up, you begin to lose some of that. An alternative to the high pass filter move from before. I'm going to keep it where it is. I spent a long time picking that. So we're going to keep it there. I like the balance that has. And there's two key elements with this. The first is there is an ADSR driving this thing that's giving us the general shape of the boom, boom kind of a sound. And I settled on an attack of 0 and a decay of 550 milliseconds, so about half a second, and a sustain about halfway up. It is important that you have a release or there is a ping sound from the release happening instantaneously, letting go of the filter. If I bring this down, that sound. If you don't want that, you need a release. Just a heads up. So this guy's connected in a few places. The first place, it is connected to, the ADSR is connected to the cutoff. The second place it is connected to is this oscillator. So this is responsible for the shape of the sound. I think it's the most straightforward. It moves this up and down a little bit, and it moves the oscillator up and down a little bit. But if we take these away, it is not responsible for the cool part of the timbre. That's what it would sound like. Play a higher note. I know, amazing, incredible. That's all that this is doing though. If we add in our first oscillator, this is responsible for the primary texture. The other one is just there to tighten up a few small. Most of it's there. Now let's talk about the filter really quick. It's important that this filter is, first, it's really important the filter does not have drive in order to get the resonance to shine through. If you add drive, you're going to crush that. It's not, and too many harmonics will come up and you won't get that resonance peak that you need. It's got a different sound. You could definitely experiment with middle values, and also you may have to fiddle with the release even further. But it's critical that the drive is gone. I already talked about the low pass. If we go all the way down, it's just too much bass. So I decided to use a bandpass. And the poles, another critical move. You won't get enough resonance with a low pole value. You know, that's it. You take this up to 4, baby. Critical. And then the resonance is driven as high as you can. If you go all the way up to 12, you can get feedback after you pass 10. And it can honestly be really fun to mess with. But it makes the sound like way, way, way more crazy. And you can get into some really cool envelope movement, but it takes a lot more finessing, and they're really more like one-off sounds rather than a sound you can play or use or write MIDI with. So I settled somewhere around here. The closer you get to 10, the more you're going to have that boo boo at the end of the sound, and the further down you go, the more you lose the cool resonance. So it's a balancing act. I don't know where I settled at, somewhere around 8.7. That's pretty good for me. So looking at the oscillator, what's going on? So these are all the critical moves here. Let's take a peek at the oscillator, because how you set the cutoff in the oscillator, they play a game with each other. So you're going to add oscillators directly inside of Filterverse, and you can do audio rate modulation. So this is coming in. I have it tuned up 60 semitones. 60 semitones. And is there a way to easily bypass these? I don't think there is. I wish there was a way to bypass these. I don't know if there is. If there is, someone let me know. I'd love to be able to bypass these so I could show before and afters with the modulation. But we have some feedback here. So let's ignore the feedback for a second and take a look at the oscillator. This oscillator is driving the filter, and this is what's causing it to move all around all crazy like. And it's moving at whatever this rate is. And since it's moving faster than audio rate, we hear it as a change in timbre, and it sounds really cool. And so setting this range is critical. In fact, you can do a lot of cool things just by automating this. There's potential there. I set a very high value, which will restore quite a bit of the high end. Now, you heard earlier, it sounded like a low mess without this, but because it's moving the filter so quick, we actually get high harmonics reintroduced into the sound. And this combined with the high resonance gives us that Yoi sort of a sound. Or whatever you want to call this thing. It's not quite a Yoi bass, somewhere in the middle. And so that's what's going on there. I took it a step further and gave it a little bit of feedback. which gives me a more of a control over the range that I'm shifting to. That's the main decision maker behind this. So right now, if I don't have this, and then I move the cutoff around, oh, you can move this? How have I used this for so long and not know that? Oh, but it disappears when you click something. Oh, now I'm not sure if that's a feature or a bug. Just listen though. Yeah, you can get some so many options, right? And with this move, we can shift it in directions. Kind of like an extra timbre controls as far as I think of it. And you sit here and you find one you like. Honestly, it can take forever, but once you hit a sweet spot, it's like there's a million good places you can put certain knobs. Like the cutoff can be moved around. It just sounds so. Some of it too is it'll sound good in one range, but not in another. And it depends on if you want to design a sound that goes good across a bigger range, which can be trickier to find settings for. And then the ADSR is moving this pitch value down and back up for me, which is giving us a contrary motion to what the filter is doing. If I bring it in, that's what it sounds like. If I match the filter movement, you get these different sounds. Let me go back until I get the one I had, because that was one that took a while to pick as well. There's a small move in here, and at times it was really strangely important. At this point in the sound design, it doesn't play too big a role, but the glide at 12% made a huge difference in some cases. Right now, it'll be a little more noticeable on the high end. If I get rid of it, it's just a lot sharper. And you can hear how the buzzing changes. That can become more or less aggressive based on how the note is gliding to the next note. So I have this on. I like what it does. And in some cases, as I was hunting for these settings, it made a big difference. I'd say right now it's kind of a minor move that I could honestly take or leave to some extent, but yeah, you'd be surprised. I also messed with the phase. This really didn't matter in the end. So anyways, that's those two settings. And then finally we have our last friend, one more oscillator. This oscillator's job is to come over to the chorus, and it just smooths out the texture a little bit. If we get rid of it, that's it before. So if you want a more sharp sound, you go that way. But we add this in. It's got a pitch of 26. Let me play a high note. Get rid of it. Okay, and it's a little tough to hear, but if I accentuate it, it's doing that to the high end. And it's got a variety of positions that sound good. But if I get rid of that with it, you can hear that zzz sound coming in as a layer. And it's just nice. It's a nice little middle resonance area. Now, if you mess with the pitch on this one, it can get very interesting. So there's a range. I settled for a rather high, if we go to what I picked or whatever, a rather high range in the 20s where it sounds more like a texture, but there is options for songwriting potential here for moving this specifically. I should really set up meta knobs so when I come back to patches, I remember the cool stuff to touch. But anyways, that's the general patch. Super fun patch, running things through it. And it's a one module patch. You saw the input though, kind of sensitive. But I'm quite happy with the result. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. If you make something with this patch, come to the Discord and share what you made with us. There's a link on my website at the bottom of the page to Discord, so you can come and join up with some fellow sound designers. Subscribe and have a blessed day.